Yes, Geordies, welcome back to another episode. The first thing I want to say, as always, I hope everyone's well. The second thing I want to say, thank you to everybody that got back to me on my last video. Now, I want to make a point clear. I didn't do it because the message insulted us or hurted us or I really cared about the message. It got us thinking, is everybody getting that experience? So I thought I would ask the question if I needed to change anything. You just got back to us. It looks like I might actually be good at this. I'm actually good at one thing for once, but no, I'm only kidding. So I wasn't doing it because a message upset us or anything like that, because I have been called worse. Let's be perfectly honest. And you probably have as well. But I just wanted to get your general feedback because I just didn't want anybody to get that experience. And I was putting myself in your shoes and I was thinking, how can I improve? How can I improve this experience for you? I'm trying my best and it will get better. But moving on, because I don't want to dwell on that at all, I'm going to do something I don't do very much in this video, and that is rant for just 5 minutes. So you might hear me ranting for 5 minutes, and I actually think you might agree with us. But we do have an interesting video coming up because yesterday I spoke about David Hopkinson. We welcomed him to Newcastle United. So I thought, why not do a little bit more about our backroom staff? So we're going to be speaking about SUDS. I'm not even going to pronounce his name because I don't want to disrespect him like that. And then we're going to talk about our rumoured sporting director, Ross Wilson. And you might be interested in that because although I think there are some positives, I'm going to be unbiased and I'm going to actually give you some of my concerns as well. And I've actually spoken to somebody from Rangers and Nottingham Forest, and they've given me two compelling and different insights into Ross Wilson. So we're going to be breaking it all down. But the first thing I want to look at is how and why is journalism and the media become absolutely ridiculous. Because one thing I will say, I felt sorry for Dan Burn, not because he's a Newcastle United player, but because he's a footballer and he's away with England, right? This should be probably the proudest moment of his life. He's representing his country. England have given the trust for him to go out and sit and speak to the media. Now, it would have been beautiful for the media to come out and ask him questions on how excited he is to represent his country, what's got him to this place, how hard has he worked, just all those questions that bring out those emotions about him. But yet they spoke about one man. That man there, I don't even want to mention his name on this channel anymore, but that man there has got nothing to do with Dan Burn. He's got nothing to do with England. Yes, he might have had previously something to do with Newcastle United, but he's not in Newcastle United anymore. I felt terribly sorry for Dan Burn because that was a moment for him to just give off some emotions on how proud he is to represent his country. Like, it is the biggest honour in football. Let's not even beat around that bush. And what a moment for Dan Burn, because throughout his career, he's never had that opportunity. He's had this opportunity. He's in line to speak to the media and to ask him questions on that guy. And I just thought the lack of respect is absolutely mind-blowing. And I just want to make that point clear because I generally felt sorry for Dan Burn in that moment. So my point is, we need to do better as, well, I'm saying we don't work in the media, but the media need to do better in their journalism, because that moment was all about Dan Burn in England. It wasn't about that guy. That is not the right time to ask Dan Burn those questions. In fact, it's got nothing to do with Dan Burn, what he did. So there's no right time to ask Dan Burn the questions. I understand why they've done it for clickbait, but it's an absolute farce. My next point, yesterday I was sitting watching Brazil and I was watching Andrey Santos and I was thinking, boy, would I love him at Newcastle United. He is some boy, and I think he fits what we look for on a midfielder. Somebody with that multi-facet, good defensively, he's good on the ball, he can create opportunities, his awareness of the game is exceptional. He's just a very good, well-rounded midfielder, and I think he would complement our midfield three as well. And if I'm Newcastle, I'm looking at this thinking he's probably not going to get a lot of game time. Is he going to get in ahead of Moses Caicedo? Probably not. They're not going to drop Enzo Fernandez because they spent over 100 million on him. At the Club World Cup, Reece James was starting over Andrey Santos, and they've already got Dario Sugo as well. So I'll be looking at this thinking Chelsea love a pound note. Let's be honest. If they can make a profit on a player, they'll be happy to sell. But in January, could we loan him with an option to buy? Because the reason why he would want the move is because he wants to go to the World Cup with Brazil. And if he's not playing at the club level, it limits that opportunity. So I get it. You're probably looking at us thinking, well, he tried at Nottingham Forest and it didn't really work out. I understand that, but I want to make this point about young footballers because I generally think a lot of people that watch this channel do have common sense. And when you think about it, right, a lot of players' pathway development is not linear. I feel like Lamine Yamal and Desire Doué are giving us a messed up and false expectation, what we expect from every young 18-year-old, 19-year-old. What was Mo Salah doing at 18, 19? What was Harry Kane doing at 18, 19? He was being on the bench for Leyton Orient or Norwich. So not every player's pathway is linear or perfect. There's going to be ups and downs. Players will hit expectation at different ages. So what I'm trying to say is people come into football at different ages and peak and develop at different ages. So development is not linear. Just because A or B star players are playing at the highest level, like Lamine Yamal, Desire Doué, doesn't mean we need to expect it from every other player. And it certainly doesn't mean we need to write off youngsters just because they're not hitting the same heights at this time as those players. And what do I always say in football? Just because a player doesn't work out with one club doesn't mean it won't work out with another club. One team's trash is another team's treasure. Some players just develop differently. So I would love somebody like Andrey Santos at St. James's Park. I can't even lie. But I just wanted to make that point clear because I've seen people write off youngsters far too early. And it's quite unfair if you ask me. Sorry, I just went off on a little tantrum there. Let's get on with the video because I want to talk about SUDS because he's coming at the club. Not a lot of people know about his role, know about his background. So I'm going to try and tell you everything I know. I don't know anybody at Atalanta, so I couldn't get any information on him, but from the looks of it, I am very, very impressed, and I'll tell you why, but let's break it down. Let's look at what a technical director's role is. So I am a little bit confused why we hired a technical director before sporting director, because when you break it down, the technical director is pretty much a sporting director's right-hand man. So you would expect the sporting director to identify and interview the technical director that he wants to bring in. But look, he's in now, and I actually think he's a good appointment. So a technical director is theoretically a sporting director's right-hand man or an assistant, if you like. Technical director has a less executive powers and is tasked with overseeing the real day-to-day running of sporting operations. So he's the eyes and the ears on the ground, tasked with lesser roles that aren't impacting decisions. So his roles include analysing player philosophy across academy and first team, overseeing coaching standard and performance departments, youth development and pathway frameworks. Now, he's the ground level, he's the bridge between coaching staff like Eddie Howe and the sporting director. So it's vital that he has a good relationship with both. So that's what his role entails. Now, I've got a specific way I think Sud is going to deliver this role, and I actually think it's quite clever as well. So he theoretically is the one below a sporting director. So let's have a quick look at his background, the way he likes to work, and how he really got to this point in his career. After completing an internship at Infosys, which is a data tech company in India, before working at Microsoft. So he's got a background in data technology and performance. And he started his sporting career at Benfica, where he founded the first sports science department. And that department was used for data analytics, player development, and performance. He spent 5 years at Benfica, and throughout that time, the team won the Portuguese league title, reached the quarterfinals of both the Champions League and the Europa League. The women's team won 2 national titles, and Benfica's academy, which will be the under-19s, reached the UEFA Youth League twice and won it in 2021-22 season. So the key aspects of his work at Benfica: he founded Benfica's first sport and science department. Now, his vision is more data-led. He brought in a more data-driven insights into his approach. So what does this mean? The easiest way to explain it, it's more proactive rather than reactive. So Benfica began checking fitness through data using GSPs, heart rate monitors, to provide insight to sports science. So what that pretty much means is he was using data to check players' fitnesses, prevent any injuries, and he also used data for recruitment as well. So pretty much since he arrived at the club, it pretty much changed the way the club ran. It was a more data-led club. They used it on the first team to track performances, used it on recruitment, but also used it when tracking fitness and making sure our players didn't have any burnout. So after 5 years at Benfica, he did move to Atalanta, and his job title there was a Director of Football Intelligence. Now, his primary role was to use data to improve decision-making across the club. During his time at Atalanta, they finished 3 consecutive top 5 finishes in Serie A and won the Europa League. Now, one thing I do know, he was involved in the recommendation of Rasmus Højlund, who they signed from Sturm Graz in Austria and then later sold to Manchester United for significant profit. He was also a major reason why they signed Adeloma Lukman from RB Leipzig. And let's not beat around the bush. During his time at Atalanta, they achieved unthinkable glory. They don't have the riches or the finances of most clubs in Serie A. In fact, if I was to look before he arrived at the club, they probably had the finances of a championship side. So the fact that he was part of the process and helping them qualify for Champions League, win trophies, remember watching them at Anfield, goes to show that he did have a big impact on the club. Now, the key aspects of his work at Atalanta: data-led recruitment, using data-driven practices. Then he also used data for player development and match analysts. And I've got no doubt that kind of sports science, data-driven approach really helped Atalanta because it allowed players to play at their peak. When you can analyze the numbers and look at them and say where he needs to maybe rest for a little bit or work a little bit harder, that just allows coaches to think of ways of getting the maximum out of their performances. Now, I actually think data science is quite a good thing in football. I think it is needed, but sometimes they do take it over the top. You hear him speaking about this red zone, or that player's close to the red zone, so he can't play this game. I think sometimes they can just play the game. But look, I actually think he's been incredibly successful at the two clubs he's been at previously. And if he can bring a new way of thinking to balance what we're already doing, it might just help us balance any injuries that are coming. So I actually do think data is quite important. When it comes to recruitment, I like a balance between the two. I like to look at the data, but I also like to watch them on the eye test. But also when it comes to player performances in training, during games, it's vitally important because you can tell whether they're close to burnout, or it also tells you whether they need to sharpen up on a few things. So I want to hear your thoughts on them. Do you think Sud is a good appointment? I personally do. In fact, quite jealous I won that role. Now, I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to give you my complete unbiased approach to this. So who is Ross Wilson? Now, I'm going to tell you about what I've heard about him. I've never met the guy. I've never spoke to the guy. So this is just off people I've spoke to. And then we're going to look at his time at Rangers in Nottingham Forest, look at his signings, look at any redevelopments that may have happened during his time there. So we're going to be breaking it all down. But from what I know, he's a very hands-on sporting director. He likes to get involved. He likes to be at the training ground. He likes to speak to the players. He likes to speak to everybody, which I actually like. And I think that's important. You need that culture, that environment around the place where everybody feels comfortable with everybody. So that means he does like working closely with managers, which I believe is very important. At Rangers and Nottingham Forest, he was praised for instilling a clear identity, aligning departments behind a shared purpose. Now, you get two different types of sporting directors. You get some that think, I'm only going to be here for a short time, not a long time. So they'll look at short-term fixes. Or you get those that want to rebrand, not rebrand the club, that's a wrong word to say, but reculture the club. And that's what Ross Wilson is. He's somebody that thinks ahead, which I absolutely like, because I think future planning is important, but he wants to drive the entire football structure, not just transfers. So he does plan ahead. He paths out a vision for everybody to go down. So he will develop scouting networks, performance departments, and even youth pathways. Now, during his time at Southampton and Rangers, he was able to bring in his own backroom staff, but in Nottingham Forest, he didn't have this luxury. So what's his transfer policy like? Well, it's data-driven, but not data-led. So he does use data, but doesn't rely on data alone. He just uses data as part of a broader decision-making. And when you look at his signings, which we will do very shortly, at Rangers and Nottingham Forest, it's a mixture of senior players, experienced players, but also youth development as well. So I spoke to somebody that knows him at Nottingham Forest, and he said he's a really nice guy, helps around the club a lot, helped us move away from relegation, and I don't want him to go. So there's a big positive, because people at Nottingham Forest respect his work, like him as a human, and I think that's important. And they actually don't want him to leave the football club. That might actually be short-sighted, because of course they're going to say that he's helped them qualify for Europe. And the season before, they were battling relegation. They finished 17th. So of course he's going to say we're in a good place and he's helped us get in that place. So let's dive a little bit deeper, because his career spans from Falkirk to Watford to Huddersfield, Southampton, Rangers, and now Nottingham Forest. He's spent a lot of time in football at different clubs. So experience, he ticks that box. Now let's focus on Rangers for a second, because he overseen the development of Rangers' training centre, and now it does compare to Europe's elite. So that's a big positive, because he was part of that process, and he began a more operational player trading model at Rangers, which I really like. He was buying low, like we're seeing with Calvin Bassey that he brought in on a free and sold for 23 million. So there is some positives when it comes to transfers, but things didn't go all smoothly at Rangers. But before we get on the bad points, let's talk about the good, because during his time at Rangers, they won the league title during 2020 and 21 under Steven Gerrard, and they made the Europa League final. They made some smart signings. Calvin Bassey, they brought in on a free, sold for 23 million euros. They signed Amad Diallo on loan, Malik Tillman on loan, who both were excellent for Rangers. But I can't lie, I wasn't massively over-impressed with many other signings. Take Cedric Itten, for example. They signed him for 3 million. They loaned him out straight away. And then the season after, they sold him for 1.8 million. And that's just one example. My friend's going to give you many more. So this led to Rangers fans' frustration. Supporters displayed banners with Wilson's face crossed out alongside managing director Stuart Robinson. Rangers fans were frustrated by what they saw as poor squad planning, injury-prone signings, and failure to replace aging players. And then when they were sacked, there was phrases like good riddance, and even fans at Southampton were glad to see the back of him. So that is a concern. When the fans are hounding you out at a football club like that, it makes you think. It does make you think. But let's be honest, since he arrived at Nottingham Forest, they have improved. So was Rangers just a one-off? So this got us thinking, it didn't go really too well at Rangers, and Rangers fans are starting to say that even without Ross Wilson, they still would have won the league and got the Europa League final, because all the recruitment was done before he arrived. So I understand that, because they did that the season he come in. So he didn't really play a major part in what the squad was already built on. So it got us thinking, let's get in touch with somebody and see what they say. And I've actually just cropped out their messages, and I'm going to let you read it. So he said, yes, of course. He made some good signings like Enes Hadji deal, which he made permanent, but injuries ruined him, unfortunately. Calvin Bassey deal, which I've already mentioned. And then he said he signed good experienced players like Jermaine Defoe on a permanent deal and bringing in Leon Balogun. Nico Raskin was also a good signing, now a Belgium international, and he's been linked with a host of Premier League clubs. And then finally, Fashion Sakala was a success, also brought in on a free, contributed very well, and then sold for 4 million. So there has been a couple of successes within his time at Rangers. But then he went on to say, however, he made some expensive mistakes. Now, I'm not going to read them all out, and they are on the right-hand side for you to see. But there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players there that have all been failures. And then he went on to say a lot more failures than successes. And it cost us a lot of money, but we couldn't get rid of them. And we still can't permanently get rid of Davis and Matondo. And then my final point he mentions, it seems like he got lucky with the good signings rather than being good spotter of talent. I don't know what you guys think of that. Now, I need to be true to what I always say. Just because a man or a player or a backroom staff or a manager doesn't work out in one club doesn't mean he can't work out in another club. So I need to be fair to what I always say, because we kind of judge somebody just off one failure. If we did that in life, then nobody would succeed. Let's be perfectly honest. So I got thinking, let's look at his time over at Nottingham Forest. During the 2022-23 season, Nottingham Forest finished 16th. He was sporting director. 23-24 season, they finished 17th. He was sporting director. 2024-25 season, they finished 7th and qualified for the Europa League. Now, is that season just a flash in the pan? I guess only future will tell you. But I want to look at over his transfers at Nottingham Forest, and I want to break them down and look over them with you guys. Because I'm not going to lie, I'm not a fan of bringing in 20 players and selling 20 players every single window. But there are some success stories as well as failures again. Let's talk about the positives first of all. Anthony Elanga, brought in for 22.9 million euros. We've obviously bought him £55 million. So they made a flip profit on him, which is a brilliant signing. Callum Hudson-Odoi brought in for 3.5 million. I think that's an exceptional buy. Chris Wood, price tag might be a little bit high at 17 million, you might say, but considering he's helped them qualify for Europa League, now they can turn back and say, well, that's money well spent. Murillo, somebody that I was talking about even before he arrived at Nottingham Forest, brought in for £12 million. I think that's a brilliant buy. I think Matt Sells was one of the best keepers in the league last season, and just signing him for 6.5 million has been a great investment. Ola Aina was one of the best performing right backs in the league last season. Considering they brought him in on a free, it's a great signing. But then you look at the loan signings. Divock Origi didn't really work out. Rodrigo Ribeiro, somebody that I was actually excited about at youth level, didn't really work out. Andrey Santos never got an opportunity. But you would look at that transfer window and think, yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's helped them get to where they were. And they made some good signings that are still at Forest. One's obviously been flipped for a profit. So you would look at that transfer window and think, yeah, it was a success. Then if we move it on to his second window, they obviously bought Elliot Anderson from Newcastle United. But Nikola Milinkovic has been an excellent signing for them. Let's not even beat around the bush. Morata has added them some depth in at centre-back. David Carmo didn't really work out. Jota Silva, he's a good player, but he's not going to put them up another level, in my opinion. And I do think there were some good young signings. I think Tyler Binden for £1 million from Reading is a good signing. Eric De Silva Morena, he was one of the best German players at the Under-19s tournament. But then you look at some loan signings like Alex Moreno, didn't really work out. James Ward-Prowse didn't really work out. So yeah, there's some nice signings, but some that I wouldn't really personally make. Then if we move it on to his just the transfer window just gone, I like this. I really like this, but it's got us thinking, is this him or is this Edu? Because now Edu's in charge and he's looking to get out. Is this Edu doing this or is this Ross Wilson? That's something that you've got to consider, because now that Edu's in, he's overseeing everything that happens in Nottingham Forest and the rest of the clubs they've got in their little group. But Maury Hutchinson, great signing. I wanted Delaney backward Newcastle United. I can't even lie about it. Calimuendo, good signing. James McAtee, good signing. Igor Jesus, he was exceptional in Brazil, so hopefully he can transfer that skill set and performances into the Premier League. Char Cunha, he's been one of the best youngsters in terms of centre-backs in Brazil. Douglas Luiz on a loan signing for $3 million, considering they've got Europa League and they need more depth in midfield. That's a sensible move. So I've tried to give you a complete unbiased view on Ross Wilson and our technical director. Ross Wilson, I think I'm 80% sure it would work, but I've just have that little slight doubt in my mind about his recruitment. I think off the field, when it comes to culture and building a culture and making everyone connecting all the dots, making everyone driving towards the same direction, I think he's excellent, because from what I've heard, he's a very, very approachable, nice human being. So that is green flag number one. I think you've got to be a nice human being to be a sporting director, because you need everybody to fall in line with what you want to do, your vision. But the pros about linking this technical director and the sporting director is the technical director might give him more of a data-led approach. It might say, you know what, that guy's not the right guy. Why don't we go for this guy for this reason? So I kind of feel like I don't like the sporadic approach when it comes to transfer windows. If Newcastle United were signing 15 players in one window, I'd be looking at that thinking, I'm not sure about this. I don't like that style. It's not my style. I think you strengthen in positions of strength, but you do it smartly. Transfer windows aren't about how many players you sign or how much you spend. It's about upgrading where you need to upgrade and bringing in the right profiles to fit exactly what your manager wants to do tactically. So look, guys, I've tried to give you everything unbiasedly you need to know about Ross Wilson. So I want to hear your thoughts. Would you welcome him at St. James's Park, or do you have slight concerns? But as always, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and until next time, away the lads.